Anne finally reveals what Camilla did right after Sarah's party shocked everyone. It started with a party. Not just any party. This one had crystal chandeliers, live violins, rare Bordeaux wine, and Sarah Ferguson at the center of it all, glowing in emerald green. The Duchess of York had thrown this lavish event at her Windsor estate, and it was impossible to ignore. Movie stars, tech billionaires, even a few royals, all were there. But while the guests clinked glasses and soaked up the glamour, Sarah wasn't just celebrating, she was reclaiming something. After years of being pushed aside, after scandal and silence, this night was her way of saying, "I'm still here." To outsiders, it was just extravagance, but to Sarah, it was survival in style. She moved through the crowd with practiced elegance, but inside she was that same woman who had once watched the royal family turn their back on her. Divorce doesn't just separate people, it severs power, security, and relevance. For Sarah, this party was a stand against all of that. But not everyone saw it that way. The next morning, while the flower petals were still being swept off the stone pathways, the headlines came crashing in. Tone-deaf Duchess blared the tabloids. Royal ex-wife throws million-dollar bash while Britain suffers. Twitter lit up like wildfire. Sarah sat in her living room, scrolling through venomous comments, heart sinking with each swipe. It wasn't even royal money, she kept telling herself, but the public didn't care. They wanted someone to blame, and her glittering party made her the perfect target. Far from Windsor, in a quiet corner of Gloucestershire, Princess Anne read the headlines without flinching. She didn't agree with Sarah's choices. Anne was famously no-nonsense, practical, allergic to spectacle. But what irked her wasn't the party, it was the vultures, circling already, ready to feast. Anne knew exactly who was first in line, Camilla. Queen consort now, Camilla Parker Bowles had clawed her way up through decades of tabloid hell and private humiliation. She had waited a lifetime to be seen as legitimate, and now, with Sarah's disaster splattered across the front pages, she saw a golden opportunity. Camilla didn't just want to fix the royal image, she wanted to scrub it clean of anyone who didn't fit the narrative. Sarah was an easy target. She was messy, emotional, too unpredictable for palace tastes, but Princess Anne wasn't messy. She was sharp, disciplined, and deeply respected, which made her inconvenient. The problem was Anne didn't play palace games. She didn't curry favor. She didn't bend, and now she had spoken. One crisp sentence in a tense internal meeting at Buckingham Palace. "At least she's honest," Anne had said, loud enough to freeze the room. And in that moment, the entire tide shifted. Camilla had come into that meeting with quiet dominance, backed by advisors and Charles's growing fatigue. She laid out a calculated case to cut Sarah out completely. No more invites, no more appearances, just silence. But Anne's words cracked that plan in half. She wasn't defending extravagance, she was defending truth. And Camilla felt it like a slap. That's when the war began, not with raised voices or public statements, but with whispers, alliances, and silent glances across palace halls. Camilla began to spread the idea that Anne was too sympathetic, too emotional, maybe even politically naive. Anne responded by saying nothing, letting her history of service and duty speak louder. But behind the scenes, neither of them stayed idle. Camilla tightened her grip on Charles, quietly arranging backdoor meetings with loyalists. Anne, meanwhile, began making private calls, pulling in trusted allies, people who'd seen too much spin and too little sincerity. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore, it was a power shift, a quiet revolution playing out in polished corridors, and neither woman was willing to blink first. Camilla moved like smoke, smooth, quiet, and everywhere. She didn't scream, didn't confront, she whispered. To the advisors who still owed her favors, to the PR experts she'd spent years winning over, to Charles late at night when his defenses were lowest. Anne's letting emotion cloud her judgment, she'd say softly, eyes full of worry. This isn't about Sarah anymore, it's about what kind of royal family we want to be seen as. She positioned herself as the calm protector of the monarchy, a stabilizer in turbulent times, and people bought it, at least at first. After all, hadn't Camilla proven herself? She'd survived public scorn, weathered decades of criticism, and emerged as queen consort. That kind of resilience earned respect. But beneath the surface, something darker stirred. An old instinct for control, sharpened by years in exile. Her next move wasn't public. It didn't have to be. She called a private meeting, just a handful of her most trusted aides. The goal? Construct a narrative reset, a new press cycle, one that didn't just bury Sarah, but rebranded her as a liability and was protecting. The plan was cold and precise. Find every scrap of Sarah's financial troubles, past bankruptcies, unpaid debts, luxury spending patterns, inflate them, repackage them, add color, then leak them through strategic channels, make it look like public interest reporting, not a royal campaign. Camilla didn't want Sarah merely removed, she wanted her discredited. As the fake dossiers were assembled in an oak-paneled office lit by antique lamps, a storm was quietly building. Someone inside the circle, no one knew who, forwarded an internal email to the press, a single attachment, a strategy document. Subject line, image protection campaign, final draft. The leak hit harder than anyone expected. Within hours, it was on the front page of The Guardian. By noon, it was trending on Twitter. Every major outlet covered it. Queen consort plotted PR smear against royal outsider, the headline screamed. The public went ballistic. Camilla's reputation, so carefully rebuilt, cracked like glass. Suddenly, she wasn't the poised consort anymore. She was the manipulator, the schemer, the face of palace intrigue. Inside Buckingham Palace, the silence was deafening. Camilla paced alone in her room, phone in hand, while advisors scrambled to issue denials. Her reflection in the gilded mirror looked unfamiliar, tight-jawed, panic in her eyes. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. But it had, and there was no spinning her way out of it. Meanwhile, Sarah sat in her Windsor home, blinking in disbelief as the story exploded across her phone screen. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. She had spent days buried in guilt and shame, questioning everything. But now she was vindicated. But the real winner wasn't Sarah, it was Anne. The press began painting her as the quiet conscience of the royals, the one who stood up, the one who saw through the performance and said what needed to be said. She didn't speak to the media. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. Inside the palace, even Camilla's once loyal allies grew distant. Her authority had come from the illusion of control, an illusion now shattered. Even Charles, who had long leaned on her judgment, withdrew slightly, not out of anger, but something worse. Disappointment. Camilla could feel it, the shifting air, the invisible hands pulling away, and in that moment, it wasn't Sarah who haunted her, it was Anne. Cold, quiet, unshakable Anne. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't schemed, she'd simply stood there and let the truth rise. Rain lashed against the palace windows as King Charles called for an emergency meeting. The air inside the room was thick, not just with tension, but with something heavier, disappointment. Everyone was seated around the long wooden table, their eyes shifting but not speaking. Camilla sat beside Charles, her posture straight, but her face told the story. Pale, rigid lips pressed so tightly together they'd lost color. A senior advisor finally broke the silence. "Your Majesty," the leaked email. "The press has confirmed its authenticity. The public is demanding transparency. There's no avoiding it now." Camilla gripped the edge of the table. Her voice came low, composed, almost too controlled. "Everything I did was for the monarchy, for this family, for you." Across the table, Princess Anne didn't flinch. She sat with her hands folded, a blank expression on her face, but her eyes, ice cold, piercing. She didn't need to speak. Her presence alone was judgment enough. Charles looked older than ever. He glanced between his wife and his sister, shoulders heavy, as if burdened by decades of royal dust he could never fully shake off. "Camilla," he said finally, voice low, "I've defended you for years, through everything, but this... I can't justify this." Camilla's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. What followed was swift and deliberate. A royal statement was drafted. not by Camilla's aides, but by the palace's core communication team. It acknowledged the leak, distanced the royal family from the smear campaign, and reaffirmed their commitment to integrity. Camilla's name wasn't explicitly mentioned, but everyone knew who it was about. Public reaction was brutal. Social media turned her into a villain overnight. Memes of Camilla scheming behind palace walls flooded timelines. Pundits on TV called her the last gasp of old royal manipulation. Overnight, her carefully restored image shattered into dust. Sarah Ferguson, now oddly quiet in the aftermath, declined interview requests. She gave no statements. She didn't need to. The silence worked in her favor. Even her critics now viewed her less as reckless and more as a victim caught in a larger game. But Camilla's true punishment wasn't the headlines. It was the coldness in the halls she used to command. Conversations stopped when she entered. Trusted aides began requesting reassignment. Events she once led were now postponed indefinitely. She remained queen consort in title, but the crown felt weightless now, stripped of influence, hollow. One night, Camilla stood by the palace window, watching the London skyline blur through raindrops. She whispered to herself, "I won. I got here, so why does it feel like I lost everything?" She thought of Charles, now distant, emotionally unreachable, of and more respected than ever. Of Sarah, laughing somewhere with her daughters, no longer on the sidelines. In a strange twist, the scandal she tried to control ended up recentering the very people she wanted erased. And she was now the one whose presence was endured, not welcomed. Princess Anne returned to her private estate away from royal noise. She didn't celebrate, she continued her life, her horses, her charity work, her silence. But there was a newfound reverence in how people looked at her now, like she wasn't just royalty but a symbol, a reminder that integrity could still exist in places drowned in protocol and pretense. The royal family carried on as they always did, but something had changed. Not just a power shift, but a narrative shift. Camilla had tried to script the story, but Anne? She let the truth write itself. And that, in the end, was the difference.